Today we're looking at the first chapter of Ruth. The story of Ruth, just as a beginning, the story of Ruth takes place during the period of the Judges. We've looked at a number of the Judges and we see that there's a whole series of cycles, and the theme throughout the book is that every person did what was right in their own eyes. And here in the story of Ruth, which takes place during that period of the Judges, we see a classic example of a family doing what's right in their own eyes. They were faithful to God, yet they weren't faithful to God. You see, there was a famine that broke out in the land where they lived in Bethlehem. There was a man whose name was Elimelech. He had a wife whose name was Naomi, and they had together two sons. Their sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And those two sons traveled with their parents, Naomi and Elimelech, from Bethlehem to Moab. The reason for that was because there was a famine in the land. Now let's back up. When we studied Deuteronomy, when we studied Exodus, when we heard the promises of God made to his people as they were entering into the promised land, God promised that he would be faithful in sustaining them and providing for them on the land. So the fact that this family needed to leave the promised land where they were living, which was Bethlehem, and they wanted to go to a place that wasn't being affected by famine, which wasn't that far away, meant that there was a problem in the land with sin. God wasn't providing for them as he had promised, because they had broken covenant as a group, as a people, and they had rejected the ways of God. So Elimelech and Naomi took their two boys and they went to the land of Moab. Back in the story of Genesis, you can refer back to where the people of Moab came from. God had allowed the people of Moab to live in a land that was just away outside of the land that was promised to Abraham. So Elimelech took his sons and they carried on the journey and walked all the way to Moab. When they went to Moab, they were there too long and Elimelech passed away. Naomi stayed in Moab with her two sons and they grew up. Both of them found a Moabite woman and they both got married. One married a girl named Orpah and the other married a girl named Ruth. Time passed, about 10 years in fact, or just short of 10 years, and both of those sons passed away. Naomi's two boys, Mahlon and Chilion, both passed away. So that left three widows living together. The widow Naomi, the widow Orpah, and the widow Ruth. Naomi looked at her situation and she heard that the famine in Bethlehem was no longer an issue. So she decided that she was going to release her daughters-in-law, who were not obligated to her anymore, going to release them to send them back to their families. She said to them, "Even if I were to have another son, would it be possible that that son could grow up and offer you children?" She sent them back to their family. Orpah and Ruth walked with Naomi to the border. They went to the border of between Israel and Moab. And as they went to the border, finally at the border, they stopped. And when they stopped at the border, Naomi said, "Girls, I want you to go back to your families." And they cried and they wept and they hugged and they carried on. And Orpah, after she had hugged Naomi, went back home to her family. Ruth, on the other hand, behaved differently. She still cried, I'm sure, still held on to Naomi, but she said, "Don't ask me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death should separate me from you." There was a plea in Ruth's voice that Naomi recognized, and also recognized Ruth's love for Naomi and her loyalty to stay. So Naomi allowed Ruth to come back to Bethlehem with her. When they returned, everybody would have recognized Naomi. They would have recognized her as the woman who had gone away, but it would have been the same woman that had grown up in their community years before. I'm sure the crowd was very happy to see her. And as she came back, they said, "Oh, Naomi's back, Naomi's back." But she replied and said, "Don't call me Naomi. Don't call me Naomi any longer. Instead, call me Mara." It means bitter, because God sent me away full, or I went away full, but I have returned empty. Imagine what Ruth would have thought when her mother-in-law says, "I'm returning empty." Ruth would have been, "What am I, chicken liver?" But that's not in the story. That's not in the Bible account. So they returned, Mara and Ruth. And in the end of chapter 1, we read that it is the beginning of the barley harvest. And that leads us into chapter 2. But chapter 2, we will be looking back in our next lesson. Have a great day.